I'll do, guys. So I've just been watching, earlier today, a video by the podcast of the Lord Seaters, and it's just I thought it was quite interesting. It's to do with the stance on nuclear energy that the Labour Party is basically taking now, and they seem to be doing a full reversal on what has been the common held stance, which has pretty much been completely anti-nuclear for, as long as I can remember, to be honest with you. It's very interesting. I won't go too much into the financial side of it or anything like that. What I will do though is I'll link that video below, and the Lord Seaters do a really good analysis of the nuclear industry and how it compares against things like wind and solar and stuff like that. And it is absolutely clear that nuclear it really is the only game in town in regards to that. But going away from the economic side, I'm more interested in what it's actually saying about the Labour Party and what they're in effect signalling by going down this road. Now, as I say, Labour have always been against nuclear for as long back as I can remember. And also, it's not just Labour, it's also the Tories and Lib Dems as well. I can remember about 15 years ago, Nick Clegg, who was the Deputy Prime Minister then, he was the head of the Liberal Democrats in coalition with the Conservative Party, with David Cameron, saying, oh, we're not going to do nuclear power because it'll take at least 10 years before the first one comes online. Well, that was like 15 years ago. So we would be absolutely drowning in excess nuclear generated electricity at this point if we'd have gone down that route. The lack of complete forethought that these people have is criminal, really. They're so criminally short-sighted in the way that they view the 5-year election cycle, to be almost psychopathic. I'm going off topic here a little bit, but going back in time, the people, for example, who, even before the Victorians, so like when people talk about the Victorians planting trees that they would never sit under the shade of, which is obviously an honourable thing. But even earlier than that, going back to the sort of like early medieval period, when the great cathedral building projects were going on, like 1,000 years ago in Europe, the great cathedrals all across Europe, each one took more than 100 years to build. So the very first people who, on day one, week one, were putting shovels into soil and digging the foundations out, making those very, what was essentially an open field or wherever it was getting built, those people knew full well that they were never going to see those cathedrals completed in their life. And they probably thought they wouldn't even see it being usable within their life, those first people. But they did it anyway. They did it because they knew it would benefit their communities and their civilization, their society, because they were thinking in much bigger terms than themselves and what we seem to be doing now. And, and thank the Lord for those people that they did that, because we now have these absolutely beautiful buildings that they've built all across Europe. And we benefit greatly from their hard work and dedication to gifting us those things, which is what it was. It was a gift to future generations, which is exactly what Nick Clegg should have been thinking. He should have been thinking, we need to gift the next generation cheap power and cheap reliable energy, and he hasn't done that. But that aside as well, with Labour being so hard up until recently on the renewables, wind and solar, I think this is actually saying that they are in a real bind at the moment, and that Labour are in a really bad position of weakness. And I think Labour possibly are seeing something that we aren't. They've probably got access to information that we haven't, and I think this is actually a sign of desperation. I think this is it's kind of like a boxer, a coach throwing the towel in when his fighter is getting mauled by the other opponent. This is Labour are signalling to us that they have given up on what is a key and core part of Labour's philosophy, that being anti-nuclear. Now, a big part of that, I think, why they are anti-nuclear, they'll talk about crap like, oh, it's dangerous or it's dirty, whatever, blah, blah. That's a lot of rubbish, by the way. I think what a lot of it comes down to is that the nuclear provides very reliable and very cheap energy once it's been built. The expense, you think with nuclear is the expenses of building it, but once it's been built, the power it generates is almost free. It's that cheap. And all you're doing is you're recouping the costs to pay back the building of the actual nuclear plant itself. The actual running of nuclear it's almost zero. It's that low, and it basically would entirely and solely prop up our entire civilization. Labour and socialists in general just can't have that. because a society that has cheap and abundant energy is a very, very successful, very prosperous and very, very happy society. And that goes against what socialists want, which is they want everybody in servitude and suffering, because that way they can justify the draconian measures that they like to bring in. You see it all the time. It's why when you look at things like the Soviet Union, why the people were so poor, they were supposedly living in the Soviet utopia and moving towards pure communism, and yet everybody was miserable, and they had big, massive bread lines. I mean, why did they have the bread lines? Well, the bread lines were there on purpose. You know, this is what socialists do. They do these things, and this isn't why why they've tried to stop us getting the nuclear power, and why they've gone down the renewables route, because they know it's going to fail in this country. Like today, outside all day, it's been grey clouds for me where I am, and no wind. So if we were relying solely on wind and solar, we would have no power today, and they know that. But in the same way, the Soviet Union manufactured shortages of food, because they knew that by having people stood in lines for bread, those people couldn't be protesting and couldn't be organising. And that's what it's all about, keeping control of people. And it's exactly why Labour are against us having cheap and abundant power. Because if we've got cheap, abundant power, it means that we don't have to work as much and we can spend more time doing what we want to do. Which means that we're then discussing and talking and exchanging ideas, which they find dangerous and counter-revolutionary. And that's what this all boils down to. I know I keep saying this, but everything that Labour do is all steeped in communist ideology. And when they hear people organise against them, they view that as being counter-revolutionary, which is exactly what the Soviets would have described it as. And that's what this boils down to. No, but the fact that Labour are having to go down the route and they are having to accept nuclear power now as being a legitimate alternative shows that they are in deep, deep doo-doo. And that is what they are saying to us without meaning to say it to us, because they are having to give up what is one of their prized asset ideas, which is the green energy. They're having to, it's just, the writing's just on the wall for them. You know, they have made an absolute hash from the beginning of when they've got into power, whether it's been upsetting the farmers, whether it's been upsetting old people, whether it's been upsetting small business owners, whether it's upsetting veterans. You know, they're just upsetting group after group after group. I mean, they've even upset both the Israelis and the Palestinian sides of that conflict as well. You know, they've managed to upset everybody. You know, so they are now in a position where they can. I think they can see that energy shortages are on the horizon, and they're panicking, which is why they're going to be now going to Rolls-Royce, and they're going to be. I think they're going to approve at great haste these small and medium-sized modular nuclear reactors based upon the nuclear submarine reactors, which I think are wonderful, by the way. You know, every town and city should have those. I think they power between like 20 and 30,000 homes. Why would we not want those? You know, and once you've got one built, the design for one done, you just basically go, put that here, put that here, put that here, put that here, because they'll just all be carbon copies of each other. So that's, again, a big part of the cost of nuclear power is designing every single nuclear plant is a unique structure designed from the ground up. Whereas with these modular plants, the designs are already done. It's just getting them to fit in an area. So again, it's going to cut the cost massively. And this is what Labour can't abide, is just having cheap power, because it means that we're not going to be reliant on their socialist ideology for their handouts. And they're viewing this as a vote loser for them. They're going to lose votes because people aren't going to be dependent on them and aren't going to be requiring all the handouts that Labour want to give us. So again, how many times can I say again in a row? It's just showing that Labour are in a huge, massive bind by having to agree to this, and they are signalling weakness to us. Although on face value it may seem like Labour are in quite a good position with this and quite a strong position, it really isn't for them, and it's going to really, really upset their base as well. There's going to be all the anti-nuclear activists. There's going to be all the anti-capitalist activists. There's going to be all the green energy activists. There's going to be all the Greta Thunberg style activists. They're all going to be getting really, really upset now with Labour, and there's going to be another nail in the Labour coffin. And once again, proving right all those who've supported nuclear all this time. Not a good time for them. Really isn't a good time for Labour. And yeah, they may have the great stonking majority, but that's only going to last so long. And I personally don't see Keir Starmer lasting beyond 2 years. Now, I could be wrong with that, but that's my personal view. And I do think he's got a 2-year shelf life from when he first got into power. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. It's coming up to 10 minutes. That was just my musings on it. I just thought it quite interesting. And a slightly different point of view that I don't think anybody's been raising with that anyway. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time. Take care and goodbye.